guys. Let's start. Right. Everyone can still hear me, right? Can everyone hear me? All right. So good morning. Today we are going to be talking about empathy in UX design. Now, empathy is basically the superpower of UX designers. Empathy is essentially what UX design is mostly about. Um, in the chats, can anyone tell me what they feel empathy is in their own definition? What is empathy? What is empathy? Or maybe by show of hands, let's, right. Empathy is the ability to understand someone else's feelings and thoughts in a particular situation. Okay, that makes sense. Empathy is putting yourself in a customer's feeling. Okay. Empathy to me means trying to balance both parties' expectations. That's an interesting definition. Right. Okay, so we are going to find out anyway. Essentially, as someone said, it's is about understanding how other people feel. Empathy is basically understanding, being able to understand how people feel. Now there is sympathy, which is basically feeling what other people are feeling. Um, say if someone is feeling pain, then you yourself, you're feeling like, it is you that the thing is happening to. That is sympathy. But empathy is basically being able to understand the person, even if you are not feeling what the person is feeling, but being able to understand, where the person is coming from. And that's empathy. So today, okay, empathy is basically the only way a UX designer can understand how another person is feeling is basically to ask them. And that is what UX designers do a lot of. UX designers do a whole lot of asking questions, asking people, asking their users how they feel, asking their users how they are experiencing a product, asking their users what their problem is about, asking, and always trying to understand what their users are feeling. And that is essentially what empathy is about. And the only way UX designers are able to do this is through research. So today we are going to learn about UX research and how designers are able to empathize with their users. So today I'm going to give you an introduction to what UX research is. I'm going to talk about the types of UX research, and then I'm going to break that down into the interviews, surveys, usability study, and then I'm going to talk about secondary research. Right, so UX, as I said, UX design is about putting your user first, and research is the only way UX designers are able to do that. So UX designers conduct research in order for them to learn about the users they are designing for. Because whatever design you are going to design, you are not designing for yourself. One mistake a lot of designers make is that they design something that they feel is fine, something that they feel is good for them from their own perspective. But that is a wrong way to come about design, because the person you're designing for is your user. And if you've not understood your user, your design is never going to work. So research also has to do with gathering feedback, about a user's perspective. So essentially, your design should always be built around research and facts as opposed to assumptions of what you feel, the situation is. Your UX research is going to help you align what you believe as a designer to what your customer actually needs. So that is what research is about. Now, in UX research, there are 3 ways of dividing UX research. So one is by who is doing the research. So if you are dividing UX research by who is doing the research, then you have primary research and secondary research. We are going to go into deeper into this, but primary research is essentially research that you are doing by yourself, whereas secondary research is research that somebody else did, and then you are getting insights from a research that has already been done by somebody else. So you didn't do the research, someone else did the research, and then you are picking insights from a research someone else did. You can also divide UX research into when that research is done. So in that case, you have foundational research, which is research that is done before you start, the process of the UX design. And then there is the design research, which is the research you are doing at the time when you are designing. And then there is a post-launch research, sorry, which is research that you do after you have already launched the product. As I said in the first class, you are never really done with designing, and you always continue researching even after you design. So that post-launch research is the research that is done after you launch your product. Now, it can also be divided into, or divided based on the kind of data that you are collecting. And in that division, we have qualitative research, which is research in which you gather qualitative data. We'll still talk about that. And then we have quantitative research, which is research in which you gather quantitative data. So this. Right. We'll talk about that later as well. Now, what is foundational research? So, as I said before, foundational research is the research that you do before you start designing. So it is the research that you do before you start designing. The idea here is for you to understand the need of the customer and the need that you need to address as a designer. So the questions you should be asking here is, what are the user's problems? How can we solve those problems? What should we be building? And if I'm able to take away my biases as I'm doing this research, or take away my biases, my personal biases as I'm doing this designing. The kind of research methods that you'll be using in foundational research are surveys. So surveys is basically you sending out questionnaires to many people and you're asking them the same question. Okay, someone is asking what bias means. Bias is basically more like your own opinion, like your own preconceived opinions that are not really based on facts. Your preconceived opinions that are not really based on any facts. For instance, now, if someone asks you, I don't know, whose soup tastes better, you are going to have a bias for your own soup, that your soup tastes better, or maybe your mother's soup tastes better, based on your own bias because this is your mom. Or in research, closer to research, although we're going to talk about bias, in fact, we have a whole class that is dedicated to bias. But to give you an insight towards that, typically when you have a product that you really love, or not, you have an idea of a solution that you really love, you are going to try to find everything that fits into that solution. And one mistake, we'll talk about it later. I'm jumping ahead of the gun, but let me just put it short. Essentially, bias is basically you putting your own preconceived ideas or preconceived notions into your design as opposed to things that you gather from research or what your users actually want. That is what bias is. But we'll talk about that later anyway. Right, so surveys are one way to do research. Surveys is essentially you are sending out questionnaires to many people, and then you are collecting, information from them by asking them the same question because they're going to be filling out the same questions, right? And then there are interviews where you collect in-depth information, like you're sitting with someone and then you're asking them questions and asking them follow-up questions until you understand in depth, of what their feelings are and what their opinions are, what their thoughts are about a particular situation. Then there are also focus groups. In focus groups, it's like almost like an interview, but in this case, you have like a collective of people, a group of people, and then you are discussing a particular situation. You are trying to collect their reactions and their ideas at the same time. That is the focus group. And then there are also field studies. Field studies basically takes place in the user's context. So if in the case of interviews or focus groups, you ask people to come to your office or come to your lab, or you have maybe a particular hall where you bring them out in order to ask them questions. In field study, you actually go to where a customer is working or where a user, your perceived user is working or is living their life, and you study them, right? You study them to understand how they interact with a particular product or how they interact with the problem that you are trying to solve. That is a field study. Apart from that, you also have competitive audits. So competitive audit is basically trying to find out exactly what your competitions are doing, right? Of course, we're going to still go deeper into all of this, but this is just an introduction, right? So competitive audits, you are trying to find out who your competition are and what exactly your competition is doing, how your competition is trying to solve a problem. So whatever problem you feel it is you want to solve, you will always find that your competition, that there are people in the market who are already trying to solve a similar problem, or there are people in the market who are solving a different kind of problem, but for the same group of people that you are trying to solve for. So that these are competition, basically. Then there is design research, which is research that you do, while you are trying to design. Now, design research happens at the stage, where you are trying to do research that is going to inform your designs as you're doing it at the moment, right? So the goal is to understand how you are going to build certain aspects of the design that you are building. So some ways of doing design research is usability study. So usability study is basically you trying to understand how usable a solution that you provided is, or how usable your product is. So you are trying to evaluate the product by testing it on real users. So the idea here is they are trying to identify their pain points, the points where they come, where they have a problem going forward, or where they are unable to complete the task that you need them to complete while using that product. Of course, usability studies are done using the prototype. So you build a prototype of the product you are actually going to build. A prototype is like a version of your product that is not yet finished, right? But it looks like what your product is going to be, and it functions like what your product is going to function like. So the idea is for your users to use that prototype, and then you study them and understand, if they are having any problems and what kind of problems that they are having, so that you know not to, or you know how to design around those problems. Right. Then you have A/B testing, right? So A/B testing is a research method where you have two different types of solutions. Let's say, for instance, you want to compare a red and a blue button, right? Or you want to compare different texts on the button. Maybe one text says subscribe now, and then another text says subscribe for free. So you are trying to test these two versions of buttons, right? That is A/B testing. So for some people, for instance, an example of this would be maybe if Netflix, okay, not this is actually a real life story, right? So Netflix found out that when they changed one button on their app, on their website from subscribe now to subscribe for free, they noticed that the number of people that actually subscribe increased by about 3%. Now, 3% may look small to you, but 3% to Netflix at that time was running into tens of millions of dollars, right? So a lot of times you may feel like you want to test, what is the best text to put on a button, or what is the best color to put on a button. And you want to test between blue color or red color. Or for instance, you want to test the text, the copy, you want to put on that button. Maybe you don't know if to use subscribe now or you want to use try for free. So, you test the two buttons with two different groups of people and see how each of those groups perform before you now pick which particular button, works best. That's A/B testing. Right. So there is also Cafe or Gorilla study. Hello, sorry, am I audible now? My network kicked me out. It's really ridiculous. Am I audible now? All right, sorry, let me try to share my screen again. All right, so card sorting is basically a kind of research where it's essentially used when you are trying to, for instance, decide on the information architecture, to use for your website, or to use for your product, right? To decide on the information architecture to use for your product. Now, by information architecture, I mean like how the information on your website or on your app is arranged. Now, if you notice, like a website is essentially information, right? Like it's essentially information arranged. Let's say you come on the home screen, and then the home screen is one, introducing the product, maybe introducing what the company is about. Oh, okay, at Gorilla Studies. Okay, so Gorilla Study is essentially you taking your product to the market, or taking your product to a cafe or to any place that has people, and then you're asking people to use your product, to test your product, right? Like potential users to test your product and see, and get their opinions about your product. That's what a Gorilla Study is. Like you take your product, maybe if your product is for market women now, you take it to market women and ask them to use it. And then you get their feedback on what they feel about the product and the difficulties they have. That is what a Gorilla Study is. Now, card sorting is used when you want to find out information architecture, for your product, or whether it's a website or an app. So what you want to do is basically what an app is, or what a website is a collection of information, right? So for instance, on the home page, you can have like a part of the home page that, talks about what the product is, and then part of the home page that talks about, the team of the team in the company, and then part of it that talks about news, or whatever you want to put on the home page, right? And then there is also maybe the About Us page. So in the About Us page, you talk about how your company started, how the first product that you built, etc., etc., etc. These are just information, right? And then you can have maybe a product page where you now talk about the product that you are selling, all the products that you're selling and the prices that you're selling them for, the description for the product. All this is information, right? So somebody may try to find out, okay, so which information do I put where? Do I put the information about description of the product on the home page? Like, where do I put what information? So in order to discover that, that is what you have card sorting for. So essentially, you write down all the information that you want to put on your website, and then you ask people, people that you want to study, or your potential users, to help you arrange those cards in groups that are most related. So the way they arrange it essentially will give you a clue to the way that they perceive, information belongs together. So if for instance they put the product picture, the product description and the price on the same page, then you know that you should be putting all of that on the same page on your actual website or your actual app. So that's what card sorting is about. Now, intercepts is a research method that gathers feedback right on the site, right? So for instance, now, when you give the prototype to let's say that market woman, and then the market woman is now using the product or using the app, and as they are using the app, you're just observing them, and then you're intercepting. Maybe interception here means that you are collecting information on where, for instance, they made a turn that you didn't expect them to make, or they clicked on something you didn't expect them to click on, or they were unable to complete a particular task. That is intercept. So at that point, you are collecting it as they are using it. You are collecting information as they are using it right there on the site. That is what intercept is. Now, of course, there is now the post-launch research, which is essentially the research you do after you have launched, the product. So the idea of this research is to find out, if you succeeded, if the product is actually good. Because, when you are still designing your product, right, you've only been able to test it with a small group of people that you are doing that research with. Now, when that product launches, okay, the difference between cafe and intercept studies, right? So cafe, gorilla study is basically um, okay, so at gorilla study, you are trying to find out how people would essentially use the app, right? If people are able to, maybe if you give them a task of, okay, please try to um, order something with this app, and then as they're ordering, they'll be talking you through, like there is a process to this, right? So as they're ordering, they will be talking you through what steps that they are taking, right? So I click on this button, and then I move to this page, and then I click on that button, I move to this page, and then I'm able to order, right? They will be talking you through it. But in intercept, you are not communicating with them, you are not asking them any question, you are just observing them, and you are taking notes. So intercept is like you are observing somebody using your product without asking them any questions. Whereas in Google study, you may be asking them questions about, the experiences that they are getting at whatever point. I think somebody's, please, instead of raising your hand, you can just type your question on the comment section, and I'll be able to read that and try to answer the question. Right. So, with post-launch research, you also want to find out, some metrics, right? Some metrics that will show whether your product is succeeding in the market, or whether your product is adopting well, how users are satisfied with the product. Because again, you are now sending it to a wider audience, and you want to get the reaction of a much wider audience. Maybe when you are doing your study, there are some users that you didn't consider, and there are some use cases of your product that you didn't even consider. But when you take it out into the wild, into the market, a lot of people are going to be using it in a lot of ways that you could never even imagine. And then they will be giving you feedback, and then you'll be taking that feedback, understanding how you're going to now, tailor your product to match different users' expectations. Now, the kind of research that you also want to do in this post-launch research is like A/B testing, because now, let's say, for instance, you find out that that this button that you wrote subscribe now, people are not clicking it a lot, because maybe people feel that if they click on subscribe, maybe they feel that somebody is going to now ask them to pay money, right? So maybe you want to now test a button that says subscribe for free, right? To see if that is going to give you a better conversion rate, right? So you can try that. So that's A/B testing, trying different colors, trying different button text, trying different arrangements, basically, to see, what works. And of course, usability study, again, also happens here. Surveys, again, also happens here. Sometimes you notice that when you're using an app, let's say something like YouTube, I don't know if some of you have noticed, when you're using YouTube, for instance, you click a video and then you see questions, and then YouTube will ask you, did you like the ad that you just saw? Then you write yes or no or something like that. They basically ask you a question about your experience, about how you're experiencing YouTube at that point. That is them doing a survey, and that is a kind of post-launch research. So pretty much every, product, every product does it. Now there is logs analysis. So logs analysis is basically is a recording of how users are interacting with a product, right? So for instance, so basically when a product is in the wild, right, companies are actually monitoring how you are using that product. So Google, for instance, there is somebody in Google that is, for instance, monitoring that this button that they've created that nobody has clicked it before, or people are not usually clicking it, or people are not usually using a particular part of, or a particular product, or they are not using it in a way that Google intended. So the way they are able to look or the kind of research they are doing at that time is a logs analysis, because they are observing how a user is using. So they are observing how far, a user scrolls, before they find something that they want, or if they are now pressing that next button or simply going to search another, with another term. So that is a kind of logs research, basically observing a user, more like being a monitoring spirit. You don't just be monitoring the user to know how the user is using your product, remotely. So that is logs analysis. Right. So primary research is, as I said, is a kind of research that you conduct by yourself, right? So it's not research that somebody conducted and gave you the results of. You conducted the research on your own, right? So of course, you know that the research you got from that information that is like you got it straight from the user's mouth, right? And you can get it by doing interviews, doing surveys, or usability testing, or the Google study. Everything that you're doing by yourself is a primary research. So some primary research can be qualitative. It can also be quantitative research, right? If you get confused at any point, just let me know. I know like all these quantitative, qualitative, all these things. So basically, they are all interconnected, right? So yes, it can be primary research and be quantitative, primary research and qualitative, post-launch research and A/B testing, design research and A/B testing. They are all interconnected. It's just basically the types of methods that you are using, to do stuff. So qualitative research methods in primary research includes basically things like surveys, basically asking open-ended questions. Sorry, what did I? Yeah, qualitative research is basically asking open-ended questions, not surveys now. Like it's mostly like interviews. You're asking open-ended questions. The idea is for you to get everything that is in the user's mind, right? You are not asking them a yes or no question. You are not asking them to give you a number question or a percentage question. You're asking them open-ended question, so that you can get all of their thoughts and all of their feelings. And then in fact, you can even be asking follow-up questions. If they answer you, you ask them why are they thinking like this? Or how does it make them feel? Or if they can give you a more elaborate idea of what they feel, or what are their thoughts, or what is their advice. All of this, is for you to get everything that is in the user's mind, for you to get the user to empty their mind. That is qualitative research. Like you're getting quality, content. Then there is quantitative research from the number quant, from the name quant. You know that we are talking about numbers here, right? So you're asking a closed-ended question. You don't want them to talk about everything that they are feeling or their emotion or whatever. You just want to hear yes or no. Or you just give them a multiple choice question, or ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about this product? You don't want to hear that they bought tomato yesterday. You just want to hear on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about this product? If it's 1, then it means that my product is bad. If it's 10, it means my product is very good. If it's 5, it means that my product is neither here nor there. If someone is asking open-ended questions are the questions that allows a person to be more expressive, exactly. Whereas closed-ended questions are more direct questions like yes or no. That's exactly what we're talking about. Yeah. So the idea of quantitative research is for you to get numbers, because those numbers are going to help you, run some mathematical operations that is going to now show you basically where your product is standing. Some other, quantitative research is like maybe calculating some, KPIs and stuff like that, because those numbers that you get will help you calculate certain things, and it will give you a numerical idea of where your product is at. Right. So every research method has its advantages and disadvantages, right? So for instance, interview has advantages. the advantage with interview is that you are able to understand what the user thinks and why. And you can also adjust your questions, to focus based on the user's answers. Of course, you can also even customize your question to a particular user, because the way a man can use your app may not be the way a woman uses your app. The way a disabled person uses your app may not be the way an able-bodied person uses your app. The way a Nigerian uses your app may not be the way an Indian uses your app. So because of all these differences with different people, interview allows you to customize questions to fit a particular user's context. Do you understand? That's one of the advantages of interview. So of course you can always ask follow-up questions. So if they, for instance, answer a question, you can now go deeper and find out why, what they feel about at that moment, what their emotion was like, what their opinion is like, etc., etc. You are also able to ask questions specific to a user, tailor your questions specific to a user's needs, and you also be able to receive direct suggestions and direct advice from the user, unlike with other research methods. So, but the disadvantage here is that it's time consuming. By the time an interview might take you, more than an hour, to complete sometimes, but on an average within 30 to 45 minutes, so it's time consuming. And also it's expensive, because, it may be expensive for you to pay a user to have the interview with you. You may have to rent a space. You may have to invite them to your office, may mean that you're going to pay for their transport, and sometimes you also mean that you have to find them some, incentives for them to agree to come for the interview, right? So yeah, even the person that is having the interview, their time is also expensive. So all of that, goes into the cost of having an interview. And also, because it's very time consuming, the sample size are not just very time consuming, it's time consuming, and even the analyzing the data that you got from it is also time consuming, because after you do all the research, you need to, convert the spoken words into text, and then you start analyzing, and because you need to kind of process that data. Processing interview data is more time consuming than processing data from surveys, for instance. So because of that, you take a smaller sample size, because of the money constraints, and because of the time constraints, and because of the labor intensivity of interviews, right? And if you are doing group interviews, like for instance, these focus groups that we are talking about, it also has another disadvantage of having a bandwagon effect. So for instance, if you have a couple of people sitting in a room and then you are interviewing them, you may find out that because somebody said that they like A, every other person will start liking A. Or because somebody doesn't want to be shy, or is shy of saying that they like something that other people did not like, would not normally like, they will not open up about it because they are ashamed of themselves, or they are shy of saying that, they feel that particular way. So there is a bandwagon effect that can, affect your data when you are doing interviews. And interviews also, has a higher rate of bias, because, especially if the interviewer is not very careful or very skilled at interviewing, their body language may alter what a user wanted to say, and because of that, they are not going to get the accurate results that approximate what a user actually feels at that moment. Typically, it's advised that you do at least 5 interviews, but at least 5 interviews, but you can do as many interviews as you need to do until you start getting similar responses. So you find out that the more interviews you do, is just like everybody's just saying the same thing, right? So for instance, if you do, let's say 10 interviews, and then every other subsequent interview you are doing, you find out that every other person is now repeating something somebody else has already said. At that time, you know that you have done enough interviews. But typically, you are advised to do, not less than not less than 5 interviews. And you in fact, you need to do as many interviews as you can do until, answers start to merge, start to, like a pattern starts to form. And you start knowing that every other person is now repeating something somebody has already said. That's when you now know that you've done enough, enough number of interviews. Now, surveys. What are surveys? Surveys is basically you asking many people the same question, right? So it can come in form of like giving them out questionnaires, or it can even be online on Google Sheets, or it can be in form of a paper that they now tick the answer or whatever, right? But basically, the idea is that it's the same exact question that you're asking, and everybody is answering the same exact question, right? So, of course, questionnaires can also include open-ended questions, but mostly surveys are closed-ended questions, quantitative questions. Because think about it, if surveys, if it's like open-ended, and somebody is now writing you an essay-like response to your question, and then you have 5,000 people, 10,000 people answering that survey, who is going to now read all that essay that the person has written? Do you understand? So that's one of the reasons why surveys are mostly closed-ended questions. But sometimes you may want to have open-ended questions to kind of get an idea of what people are thinking, especially if you have the time or the resources to read all of the essay that the person is going to write for you. Right. So the advantages of survey is that you can, because there is a larger sample size, you can understand how a larger number of people feel about something, right? And it's also very quick, right? Because it's just a survey. People are just going to maybe take people like 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes even, to just complete a survey and send it back to you. And also it's very cheap, it's very inexpensive. It's just a matter of going on your computer and typing up a Google form and then sending out to people on your social media, or people on your contact list, and that is a survey. Like it's a very cheap method. Like it's very, very cheap for everybody involved. But the disadvantages is that it does not allow for in-depth feedback, right? So it's just a yes or no. And sometimes even when it has open-ended question where people can give you, their mind, you cannot ask follow-up questions, right? So you cannot get in-depth feedback or an in-depth approximation of how somebody feels, right? And of course, it does not work for all types of research questions, because there are some research questions where you need to get more information about what you are asking for. And of course, you cannot personalize. So the same question that you ask, somebody that has that can see, is the same question that you're asking somebody that is blind. It's the same question that you're asking somebody in Nigeria, it's the same question you're asking somebody in America. So it does not allow for personalizing, questions to particular users, right? So that's another downside of surveys. Right. So usability study is essentially evaluating a user or evaluating a product by testing it on users. So basically, you have a prototype or your actual product, and then you are giving it to users and let users use it, and you are asking them certain questions, asking them to complete certain tasks, and then watching how they complete those tasks, and then you're asking them how they feel about completing those tasks, if they had any difficulty, if there's any feedback, and all of that. But the point is that you give them a product for them to use, and then as they are using it, you are getting feedback, and they are also giving you feedback, and they're asking them questions, and you're getting answers. So you can get some usability study. There are some qualitative research that you can do. For instance, you can find out how a user feels, when they are using the product, and typically when the usability study is going on, a user will typically run you through, or you ask them to run you through what they are feeling or what they are thinking at that moment, what they are seeing, what they are thinking, what their plan is, and all of that, or how they intend to complete that task, what they are looking for, you know. So you can get qualitative research or qualitative data by listening to them and getting all of that. But you can also get quantitative data. For instance, you can find out if you give them a particular task to complete, you can find out how many minutes it took them to complete the task, right? That's a qualitative data because it's a number. Or you can find out how many, if you have like maybe if you did a usability study on 10 people, out of the 10 people, how many of them were able to complete the task is a qualitative, is a quantitative, data. So the advantages of usability study is that you can learn firsthand, how a user interacts with your product, and you can observe how they are interacting with your product, and that can inform, the decisions you make thereafter. Then you can also challenge some of your assumptions, right? So you can, for instance, assume that, this button is better to be put here. And then doing a usability study, you find out that putting that button there does not work for many users. Then that has challenged your assumption, and you can now decide to change it and put it in the place where users expect it to be. Or, for instance, you find out that users, the way users are going through the purchasing flow is not what you expected. And then there are things that the users expected to be there or expected to find, and then they're unable to find it. And it's now your role as a designer to make it more intuitive for the user, so that users, most of them, at least all of them, are able to complete the tasks that they are given. And of course, the users can also give you in-depth feedback on what you, or on the product, basically. Now, the disadvantage is that it only measures how easy or a product is. It rarely talks about things about why, or if the user, or if the product is even useful in the first place, or all of that. It just measures how easy a product is to use. Of course, it can be expensive because for the same reason interviews are expensive, because you have to be there, the user has to spend all that time, everybody's spending all that time, trying to get things done. So for the same reason interviews are expensive, usability studies are also expensive, because of course they are conducted in person. Basically, are organizing time for both the interviewer and the interviewee to be available, organizing all that meeting sometimes can be very cumbersome and expensive. And also, another tactical disadvantage of usability study is that the way users use a product while you are there is not the way they use it in the wild. So sometimes you may get a false sense of how users are going to use a product, because there is the way people behave in a controlled environment is not the way they behave, in the actual, sense of the word. So, for instance, now, if you give a user, let's say, an app like Google Maps. I think Google Maps is an app everybody knows, right? Google Maps. If you are going to do a usability study on Google Maps, right? You are going to be in the lab, and then you are going to, ask the person to, how they are going, if they are able to use the thing, or how they are going to press words and, or put their target from, start to go, or start to end, and all of that. Basically, how they are going to use it. But in the real sense, the way people use Google Maps in real life is a lot different, because some people may even be using it when they are driving, which is not safe, right? So, when the usability study is not able to catch that, catch that reality of how people would typically use Google Maps. So the way people may even use Google Maps is, you will not even expect it, for instance, me, when I came to Lagos, when I came to Lagos, right, the way I use Google Maps is like, I used to find my way around. So I didn't know anywhere, and I had to drive. So when I'm driving, I would just maybe put my final location, and then Google Maps would tell me, how I'm going to get there, and then turn here, go there, and then I reach where I'm going. But now that I know everywhere pretty much in Lagos and I know my way around, I still use Google Maps. But the reasons I use Google Maps is a lot different now. So for instance, I no longer use Google Maps to tell me direction. I use Google Maps to find out the time it will take me to get where I'm going, so that I'll know how to plan my waka. You understand? How to plan my movement, right? So that's how I use Google Maps. And if you are just going to use usability study, maybe you have an idea, because your idea of making the app might be to direct people, whereas people are now using that app to find out how long it's going to take them to get to a meeting. You get, it's not, and you as a designer might not have predicted that. In fact, some people are even using Google Maps for a different reason altogether. So some people are using Google Maps, to spy on their girlfriends, for instance, right? So that they know that their girlfriend or their driver is not taking their car to where they don't want it to go. So there are different ways people can use a product that you will not be able to discover if you are using a usability study. Right. So more time. Oh, okay. This class is going to be like a 2-hour class. I hope you guys are not going to run away. Someone was saying the other day that they wanted a longer class. This is a longer class, unfortunately. Sorry. I was just going deep into every slide. I forgot to keep track of time. And we still have a second section of this class that is supposed to be the actual practical section. And the time is already showing is like 5 or 10 minutes to the end. But we've not even started the second. So you guys are going to be here for 2 hours. I'm sorry. Right. So secondary research is basically research that you are not the one doing it, right? So someone else did the research, and then you are using the results, right? So the information you get is like reading a study, right? Reading a research that somebody else has done. That's secondary research. In fact, a lot of what we are going to be studying in UX design is secondary research. For instance, this thing about primary buttons, secondary buttons, and all of that. These are research that people have done in the past that we no longer have to do again because people have done it. If people have done that research in the past, it is still true today, right? Of course, you can still test it if you have all the time in the world, but there is really no need for that. There are principles of UX design that have gone through so much and so much research that doing another research on it is just a waste of time, right? So a lot of what we're doing, a lot of the principles of design we're going to be learning is coming from secondary research. But apart from that, secondary research can also be studies that people have done in the industry that you are in. Maybe somebody has done a study, or maybe you want to start an app, a food delivery app, for instance, right? And instead of you going to do your own, foundational research, you can go and find out how Uber did their own, or how Bolt did their own, or how Uber Eats, did their own. And that will be a secondary research because you didn't have to perform the research yourself. You are just reading it from what other people have already done, and you are taking from that knowledge. Of course, the advantage of that is that it's cheap. It's very cheap because you are just reading what somebody else has done. You didn't have to do the interview by yourself. You didn't have to do the survey by yourself. You didn't have to analyze anything by yourself. So it's very, very cheap and it's very fast, right? Of course, you can basically find it online on Google, or maybe can be with a little money. You just buy, the research and all of that. And it can also be a good supplement, from your own findings. So if you have done your primary research and then you see secondary research is kind of corroborating something that your primary research has already, agreed to, it kind of strengthens your primary research, right? So about our course project, right? Well, I'm going to talk a bit about the course project that you're supposed to do. Your assignment this week is to find a problem worth solving. Find a problem. Now, the reason I put this word in bold is that whenever I ask people to find a problem, what they come back with is a solution. And that is not what I asked. Find a problem, right? So, and this is a mistake a lot of designers make. They start their design process with a solution instead of starting it with a problem, right? So your assignment for this week, this assignment may look very simple, but it's not simple. It's to find a problem in your community or a problem in the world that is worth solving. Of course, it's better if this problem is a problem that you can relate to, you know. It's better if it's a problem that you can relate to. Now, we'll talk a bit about it. Now, how do you find a problem worth solving, right? So how do you know that a problem is worth solving? One is that that problem has to be urgent, right? Urgent meaning that if that problem is not solved ASAP, something will spoil. That problem needs to be solved ASAP, right? It needs to be solved. So there are certain things that can create urgency. For instance, during the COVID-19 era, we found that a lot of things changed and a lot of companies shut down, right? And because of that, in fact, one of our products here at Wella Health, you know, was a solution that came about during the COVID-19 era. Because during the COVID-19 era, people could no longer move about. But people could no longer move about, but they still needed to get their drugs. And HMOs still needed to send drugs to the people that are signed under them. But because everybody was on lockdown, there was nobody to make that happen. And people were no longer getting their drugs. People were getting sick and nobody could see them because, again, hospitals were closed. So because of that, Wella Health came up with a product, which is actually now the most successful product, you know, Wella Health has, which is WeFeel. So WeFeel became the people that connected HMOs, that's health management organizations, to their beneficiaries. And they became the go-between that were able to now supply people the drugs that they need. That solution was urgent because if there was no solution to that, a lot of HMOs would have shut down, a lot of people would have died, you know. So the problem was urgent. Unworkable. You have to find a problem that is unworkable. Unworkable means that the problem has to be solved, right? It has to be solved, and it has real consequences if it's not solved. So if this problem is not solved, there are real consequences. In the case of that I've just provided, the real consequences can be a company shutting down, it can be somebody dying, it can be somebody losing their job, you know, it can be somebody dying of hunger. So there are real consequences to not solving that problem, right? And then the problem is unavoidable. So if you don't solve that problem, it will remain. It will not disappear on its own. So that problem is unavoidable. If basically find a problem that if somebody doesn't solve that problem will remain with them, right? The problem is not going to go away anytime, right? And then that problem is underserved. Underserved means that not a lot of people or nobody has solved that particular problem, or not a lot of people have solved it, or nobody has solved it for the customer that you have targeted, right? So the problem you find has to have all of these four. It has to be urgent, it has to be unworkable, it has to be unavoidable, it has to be underserved. Of course, it can have all these to a certain variety. So if you can find a problem that has all of these four together, you have a winner. Now, you may think that because you have a problem, or because you found a problem, that problem means something for the user, but it's not always the case. So you may, for instance, come up with a solution, right? And the user, thinking of all the problems that they have to go through to get their solution, they will just forget it. I'll give you a very simple example. A lot of people have my phone now. the memory on my phone is almost full. If somebody comes to me and says, oh, that they have this app that does this and this and that and that and that, that I should go and download their app on this thing, what is it called again? Apple Store. I probably would not download it because I don't have memory on my phone. I don't have memory. So you can see that even if the problem is a problem I can relate to, I don't have memory on my phone. And whatever problem it is that you have, it will have to be more important than this my Uber app or this my Google Maps or this my other apps that are on my phone that is taking my memory for me to choose it, right? So it's the same thing for the user. So a problem you have, you must weigh, it must be a problem where the gain exceeds the pain, right? The pain here is the pain of using that your solution, or of paying attention to that your problem. In fact, let me just put it that way, because I don't want people to be thinking of solutions. I don't want anybody to be thinking of solutions, right? So the gain of solving that problem must be greater than the pain of solving that problem. Now, the pain of solving a problem for me, or the pain of downloading an app for me, is having to delete another app on my phone, right? That's a pain for me, right? For some companies, it may be even trying to find the thing, okay, so where are you located? Yeah, so I have to now go on Google, on Apple Store and start looking for the app again. That's a long thing, right? Oh, I'll have to start trying it and start learning a new skill, right? That's another pain. Oh, I have to, buy it. Maybe it's not even a free app, right? That's another pain, right? So it's something I have to buy is another pain. It's something like, okay, even if after buying it, I have to now implement it. Let's say it's something that is maybe an app that I have to install on my computer. Like the other time I asked people to install Figma. You see how it took some people a whole week to install Figma, and some people have not installed it up till now, even though we have a lesson. So you can see that's a pain of implementation. Now a pain of deployment. So if it's a business that you're solving that problem for, you have to imagine that business will now have to retrain their staff in order to solve that problem the way you want them to solve it. And then ownership, right? So all these are pains, right? Now you have to look at the gains, right? So for instance, you have to ensure that your problem, if that problem is solved, it maybe increases the person's revenue, or it helps them save cost, or it helps them save time, or it helps them reduce the number of people that they have to employ, or it gives them some competitive advantage, or it improves their reputation, right? So this gain here has to be a lot more than this pain here. And if you ask me by how much more, I would say at least times 10. So if you are solving a problem for somebody, make sure that problem is maybe increasing their revenue times 10, or is saving them cost times 10, or is saving them time times 10, or helping them reduce employment of 10 more people, something like that. Of course, these are not written in stone, so I don't carry it. Like nothing here I'm saying here is written in stone, but just to give you an idea of the kind of problem you're looking for that is worth solving. Right, so the movement should be better than inertia. That's the whole idea of what I'm trying to say. Right, okay, so this thing remains. Ew, that's really bad. Why would it remain there? All right, okay, so yeah, so another thing you have to think about in a problem that is worth solving is, this is like a framework of thinking about the problem, right? On the side, you have the problem has to be, there are problems that are blatant, and there are problems that are latent, right? So a latent problem is a problem not everybody notices. Maybe you are seeing that is a problem, but not everybody agrees with you that is a problem. Or the community are trying to serve, they don't agree is a problem. That's a latent problem. If the community, everyone can see that this is a problem, it is a blatant problem, right? Then on the x-axis, you have aspirational, which is basically something that is not really, it's not really a do or die affair. It's just something that if I do it, I'll feel better about myself. That's aspirational. And then critical is something that is a do or die affair. So you need to solve a problem that is both critical, or you need to find a problem that is both critical and blatant. Critical meaning is a do or die affair. Blatant meaning is a problem that everybody appreciates. So you don't need to educate anybody that this is a problem. You don't need to educate somebody that they are going to die if they don't take drugs, or that they are going to die, or this pain is going to remain a pain if they don't take this pain medication. Right. I think, okay, yes. So this is the way I want you to present your assignments, your group assignments. This is how I want you to present it. One, I want you to talk about the user who has the problem. So whose problem is it? Who is the person who has this problem? So you have to talk about a specific person who has that problem, or a specific type of person who has that problem, not some generic group. Maybe, people in Nigeria is a very big group. People in Nigeria doesn't mean anything. Anybody can be in Nigeria. So maybe you want to tell me a particular kind of person, maybe a poor man who doesn't have a car, who cannot afford healthcare, or a poor man who cannot afford a mobile phone. That is the kind of user I'm talking about. Or maybe a very rich man who is looking for a way to, have fun. That is a particular kind of user. That is a specific group of people. So I don't want any generics, or let's say Nigerians. That is too wide a group. Or let's say Africans, too wide a group. Or let's say men or women, or Nigerian men or Nigerian women. That is a very wide group. I want specific people that I know I can relate to. That's a specific user. And then you need to talk about their need. So what function or what functional need do they have? And then you need to talk about insight. So what is the thing that you've identified about their need that nobody has really thought about, right? So it can be a social or emotional tension, or it can be a deeper need that nobody has really, considered. For instance, I'll give you an instance. So in the case of this, in the case of that, the product that I talked about, that's we feel in that COVID-19 era, people understood. Okay, so the user in that case was HMOs. That's health management organizations, HMOs. That's user on one side, actually. And then the user on the other side are sick people, people that have chronic diseases, right? Then the need that they have for the HMOs needed to deliver drugs to their customers. That's a particular need, right? And then a particular need for the people, the consumers on the other side is that they needed to, continue their chronic medications, right? And then the insight in that case was, they didn't have the capacity to fulfill this need because there was a lockdown, And even though after the lockdown, we now discovered that actually people really don't want to have to wait for long to, get their medication. People wanted the medication to be delivered to them. And HMOs actually didn't want to go through the hassle of finding pharmacies, But this is a problem that we only discovered after the COVID-19, right? So that's, no, it's not an individual project. It's a group project. And the reason I want it to be a group project is that I want you guys inside the group to debate, on what problem that you want to solve. Now, I want it to mimic real life, right? I'm working inside a team of designers. Do you think my opinion is paramount? No, I have to debate my opinion with 4 other people who don't see it my way, right? I have to debate it with them. So if, for instance, I see a problem, they don't see a problem, I have to convince them that thing is a problem. And this is part of the skills I want you guys to also develop, because you're going to need it as a designer, especially somebody. In fact, you need it as a designer, whether or not you're working in a team, right? So this is the end of the first half of our of our meeting today. Now, let me go to the second half of it. Let me go to the second half of it. I'll stop sharing my screen now, and then I'll share a different kind of screen. If you have any questions about this particular section, you can continue asking the questions on the chat box while I try to retrieve the second. Oh, by the way, at this time, those of you who have joined our group, it's time for you to join the class. So now is the time for you to join the class. So get on your Figma and join me on the canvas. Can you? Get on your Figma and join me on the canvas. Am I audible? Right, so get on your Figma and join me on the canvas. I'm not seeing anybody. Yes, all research is research, right? Research, you cannot be a designer without research, because research is the only way you know your user. Research is the only way you can understand your user. Research is the only way you can empathize with your user. So you cannot skip any of the researches. You cannot skip foundational research. You cannot skip design research. You cannot skip post-launch research. You cannot skip any of it. If you stop doing post-launch research, that means your product will remain stale. You know, YouTube has not remained the same, forever. YouTube has been changing over time. Every year they will put another feature. Every year they will change something because they are researching. Those changes don't come from the sky. They come from research. I'm not seeing anybody on the canvas. What is going on? Who has come on the canvas? Join, but I can't see you. Abi, is it from me? Can you guys see my cursor? Okay, 14 people. Then it's most likely me. Let me close my Figma and open it back. Okay, I think I can see 14 people. Okay, right. So there are two ways you can do this class. You can either spotlight me and follow me around, but please don't block the don't block the screen. Don't interact with anything here. Um, just leave the screen for me. Hey, don't interact with anything there. Right. So this part of the class is our introduction to Figma. And first of all, we're going to talk about frames, and then we're going to talk about using editing text on Figma, And then we're going to talk about using color tools on Figma. This is going to be our introductory class. Right. So after everything we talk about, you can find your names at the bottom, like your team names. You can find your team at the bottom here, and you can practice whatever you want to practice, or I can be giving some assignments. You'll be doing it within your own canvas there, because that is where I'm going to see it. And if I need to acknowledge it, that is where I'm going to see it and know which team is doing what. For some reason, my computer is really slow. Maybe I need to let me close down some screens. Okay, now it's faster. Okay, so let's start with frames, right? The last time we talked about frames, but this time we're going to go a bit deeper. Now, what are frames? If you follow my cursor, you see, okay, actually just go back to the Zoom so that you can see everything I'm doing. You can see the bigger picture of everything I'm doing. So yeah, give me a second. Let me. All right, Iyanoluwa, you can talk now.
Okay, I just wanted to say that how can I join? My network went off when you were giving the instructions, sir.
How can you join the Figma canvas?
Yes, sir.
Have you joined the team, the Figma team?
No.
All right. So
okay, yes, the Wella schools. I've joined. I've joined the Wella schools.
Yeah. So open the file. The name of the file is Figma class. If you open it,
okay,
it's going to bring you on the canvas. Yeah. Okay. So frames. So what are frames? If you look at my cursor, this is where frames are, and you can pick either frame, section, or slice, right? So we're going to talk about frames first, right? So if I pick a frame, you can see that on this side, these things are just blocking my way. You can see that on this side, automatically on the design side, you see, and it will ask me where I want it to be a phone, and then it will give me all the options of phone, like iPhone 14, iPhone 13, etc., Android, and all of that. Or if it will give me an option for a tablet, let's say I want it to be a phone, for instance. Let's say iPhone 14 Plus. If I pick iPhone 14 Plus, automatically it puts that frame on my canvas, right? Guys, please don't edit the things on the screen. We are still learning with that. Don't edit them. So what a frame does is basically puts your design inside the frame, right? It's just like when you are drawing. If you've ever painted anything, you find that you can paint things that are beyond the frame, but when you put it inside the frame, the only thing you see is what is within that frame. So the thing, for instance, you can see this block I have is actually bigger than this frame, but once I drag it into the frame kind of limits what I can see. So this block is bigger, but the frame limits what I can see, right? Now, the frames are important because we normally work with digital products, and digital products are limited. So there is a limited size to the screen that we're working on. There is a limited size to the phone we're working on. Even on paper, there is a limited size of the paper that we're working on. Therefore, we need to limit ourselves when we are working and understand the size of the design that we're working for. So that's what frames do, right? And everything we do happens in a frame. There are different ways of editing frames. Now, when you pick a frame, there are different things you can do to it. You can, for instance, increase the width by dragging, increase the sizes by dragging the length and width. So this thing is no longer, of course, it's no longer iPhone 14, plus size, because I've changed the size. Another way you can change the size is from this panel. So you can come here, and this width, I can change it from 1200 to 300 width, and then this height I can change it from 1400 to 300 height, right? So that is one way of changing. That's another way of changing it. And then you notice that right here there is this thing that is called constrained proportions. If I click on this, if I lock these constrained proportions, then let me show you what it does. If I log this constraint proportion, then whatever I key in here, you can see the width is now 538. If I change this width, it will always remain in the same proportion as this height. So if I change this width, for instance, from 538 to 400, the height is automatically going to change, right? To maintain the proportion. You can see the height has changed to 758. And if I change it to 300, the height automatically changes to 500 and something, just to maintain that proportion, right? That is what this constraint does. Another thing I can do to a frame is I can give it a corner radius, right? Corner radius is basically the radius of the corner, like making it a smooth corner, so it's no longer a sharp corner. So for instance, if I make the corner radius of this thing 14, you can see that the, Edima, please, can you click out of that frame, please? Click out of the frame so people can see what I'm doing. Exactly. Thank you very much. So if I change the corner radius to, let's say, 50, right? See what it does. You can see the radius has been made 50. Now you may be wondering what exactly that 50 means. Now, what that 50 means is basically, if I bring an ellipse and give it a radius of 50, radius 50 meaning that this thing is 100, right? You see that this ellipse, the radius of this ellipse is 50. Why? Because the width is 100. So it means that the radius is 50. So this means that the radius of this thing is going to match one-on-one with this ellipse. That's what the corner radius represents. If I want to, for instance, make this a whole, like I want to make it like a round, like a round edge, I would need to make the corner radius at least half of the width. So if the corner radius is, if I make it 150, you can see this thing becomes a perfect rounded, it becomes perfectly rounded basically. So that's the things that you can do. That's the ways that you can edit a frame. Right. So let's talk about a text, editing text on Figma. Now, I would actually advise you to view this on the Zoom and not on the canvas. View it on the Zoom so you see a broader picture of what I'm doing. So when you are writing text, there are different ways for you to write text. Of course, you start with picking the text icon. If you click this text icon, is a T. You click it, you can see that my cursor has changed to a cross. Now there are different ways I can do this. If I click on this thing, on a single click, it means that the text I'm going to create further, you can see that blue box around it is hugging the text. The blue box around it is hugging the text. So it's hugging the width of the text. You can see. Another way I can create a text is by clicking and dragging. If I click and drag, you can see I have fixed the width of the text box. So that means whatever it is inside the text box, the width of the text box is the same. You can see this is the width of the whole text box, but the text itself is smaller than the text box. Here, the text is the same size as the text box. So this is hugging the text. You can see that the box of this text is hugging the text. I can change this by dragging out, the width of the text, and all of a sudden it's no longer hugging. If I want it to hug back, I can go to this text part and click on this part that says auto width, and automatically it's going to hug it back. The same can happen here. If I click auto width here, automatically it's going to hug it back. That is what fixed width. Now, with the height, as I said, when I click and drag, when you click and drag, you get a box like this. Another thing you can do is you can change the height to auto resize the height. This is the icon here for auto resize. If I click it, you can see automatically the box resizes in height. Now, another thing you can do with text is fonts, right? So here is GGGG. You can look here. The fonts here is Enter. Let me put some other letters there so you can appreciate. The name of this font is Enter, and you can see it's bold, right? I can change. Okay, let's talk about font size first. So the font size is 36. I can change it to 10. Sorry, I have to click on it first, and then I can change it to 10. You can see it has reduced to 10. Or I can change it to 16. It has increased to 16, 40. I can change it to whatever size I want, actually, from this thing. Or I can actually type whatever I want inside there. I can type, say, 30, for instance, and then it becomes 30. Or another thing I can do is to drag the size of this box. Like if I drag the size of this box, automatically I'll be changing the text within it. Another thing you can think of, or another thing that is about text is the font styles. The font styles of the text. So that's this. This is the styling. So here, this particular font or typeface has different. Sorry, we didn't even talk about typefaces. Right. So this typeface I'm using is Enter. Right. This is Enter typeface. If I want to change the typeface, I can click here, and this typeface here is the ones on the file. I can click and go to popular typeface or Google fonts, right? And then it's going to show me a very huge array of different, fonts that are available. You can see these are different typefaces that are available, right? But I kind of like to work with these ones because these ones that I've actually chosen for this file, it gives me a lot of flexibility, and I will explain why. So you can see that not all fonts can do this actually. So these fonts now that I'm using, Util, you can see that it has lights, it has book, it has different sizes, and then in italics it also has different sizes. But not all fonts are like this. If I choose another font, say another font from Google Fonts, let's say this one, for instance, you can see this one does not have any styling. There is no styling to it, right? Because that's just how it's designed. It just doesn't have styling. But there are some other fonts that have styling, like say this one, for instance, Actor. Okay, Actor doesn't even have styling. Well, like the fonts I've chosen for myself that I'm using inside or the ones that I installed, you can see the secular, this thing, for instance, it has a lot of different styling I can put to it. So these are how you can change your styling. You can put italics and all of that. Other things you can change are the corrections on it. For instance, you can have like an underlined text, or you can have a something strike through it. All these are decorations, or you can remove all of that altogether. Font styles, we have talked about it. Of course, there are shortcuts, Command B, Command I, that you can learn on your own. If I use Command I on this, Command I because I'm using a MacBook. But if you have a Windows, you can use Control I or Control B. So Command I or Control I does this. You can see it has changed to italics, and then Command B, changes it back to normal. Right, so the concept of line height, right? So line height is basically the space between each paragraph, right? So, sorry, between each line, not each paragraph, sorry, between each line. So I can increase this line height by, increasing the number here. Now, there are different ways of doing it. For instance, if I type 10 without typing percent, you can see it's like an absolute 10. Let's say 100 now. Type that's the spacing between it is 100. But if I write 100%, it means something different. 100% means that that the height between them is exactly kind of the same height as the text itself, as the text box itself. That's what percent means. So there is a difference between absolute numbers and percentage numbers. So if I write an absolute 100%, you can see what it's doing. And if I write an absolute percentage, 100 or 100%, you can see what it's doing. So I can, for instance, do, let's say 50%. You see, so basically that's what line height is. Now there is also paragraph spacing. So this one right here is paragraph spacing. Here we've made it 36, but you can also change it, right? That's the spacing of the paragraph. You can go all the way from 0 to all the way that, right? Let me see if I can do a negative number, negative 50, for instance. Okay, it doesn't do. So the minimum we can go is there. And then there is also indentation. So indentation is basically this space between the beginning of this line and where the paragraph starts is what you call paragraph indentation. So how you can change that is you go on details and then you look for paragraph indents. You see here is 50. I can change it to 5, for instance, and you can see it's all the way back there. Or I can change it to 0, for instance, if I don't want any spacing at all, right? That is paragraph indentation. Some people like it because, I don't know, it makes that work neater, whatever that means. But that is what paragraph indentation is. Now, okay, decoration. We've talked about decoration, actually. We've talked about decoration. Decoration is here, where you, sorry, some basics where you put an underline there or you put a strike through. These are decorations. Then case, you can actually design your text in such a way that it follows a particular case. So here, for instance, what we have here is all lowercase, or non actually, because I really didn't choose anything. If I want to make this a capital letter, I can actually make it a capital letter, But here I can choose to make this, sorry, I have to select it first. I can choose to make it all caps. You can see it's all caps. Now, if I choose this all caps, everything I type here, I can no longer control it being lowercase. It has to all be in caps. It's already out of my control because I picked it here to be all caps. I can also pick it here to be all lowercase, in which case, even if I type on my typewriter, I put it in caps, it's always going to be in lowercase and I cannot change that. Another thing you can do here is to make it like title case. So meaning that every other word starts with a capital letter. And that way, whenever you put space, you start any word, is going to start with a capital letter, and the one that is following it, and the one that is following it is going to be in lowercase letter. Right, that is that is the case. Then you have lists, right? So there are different lists that we have, or listing styles that we have. Here there are no lists now. If I want to put a list, of course, lists are only applied to paragraphs. So if I put a list, you can see that kind of list, or I can choose a numerical list to make it 1, 2, 3, and all of that. That is what a list is about. We've talked about indentation of. So there's another indentation that we need to talk about, which is the flying. I think it's called the flying. Sorry, a hanging punctuation. So here, for instance, you can see, you may not be able to, you can observe it here, that the punctuation is now hanging. If I mark it hanging, if I mark hanging punctuation, this thing comes out of the box. If I select it out, it goes back into the text box. You can see that. Right. Then numbers, there are a couple of things you can do with numbers. You can edit numbers in a couple of ways. Here. Okay, so you can see different styling of numbers there are. Here is proportional, here is monospacing. This one is proportional lowercase. You can see everything is changing. And here is also monospace. And then there is this one where you can make like this 2 now. Like if you want to say root 2, like root, is it root now or base, yeah, base 2, right? So you can do that, or you can say power 2, you can do that, or not, this is normal. Now, in the case of this, I can say, for instance, a fraction. There is also fraction. If I want to make this a fraction, I can come here and then make it a fraction. You can see that. So that's it for, you know, that kind of editing text. Now, other edits that you can do to text. You can see this is actually a text, right? It's a text because I can add other things there. So it's a text. So you can fill up a text. You can use colors to fill a text. So here, for instance, you come on this properties panel, and then you click this fill color. You can change it. You can type anything. So this is one way of changing color. Another way of changing color, if you know the hex code, for instance, I know that hex code of black is 0000000. That's 6 zeros. If you enter it, it becomes black. So you either change it by changing the hex code, or you can change it by tapping anywhere on the canvas, right? And this is the canvas for red. You can also change it, you know, here, all the colors. There are no colors here that are not on, you know, Figma, right? So that's fill solid. Another kind of fill we have is filling ingredients, right? So to fill ingredients, you can see this. This is solid, this is gradient. So if you click this gradient, it will now give you 2 color options, you know. So here you can come here and maybe make it, sorry, let me be showing you. So you can come here and make this one red. So you make it be a gradient from red all the way to, say, blue, for instance, right? So that is gradient filling. Or you can even make it from totally transparent, say, this one, it can, like, I can make it 0, and then it becomes like transparent, but it's still transparent red. So I can still make it like transparent blue. So from transparent to this, and then this one, I can even move it, right? Sorry, I can move this one around, like move it around. You can see, or move this one up, you know, depending on what I want to achieve. And then I can actually add extra stops in between, right? And then I can even change the color of those stops. Like this one, this stop now, I can make it yellow, you know, or sorry, let me make it yellow. And then this stop, I can make it, I don't know, red. Yeah, like have different stops. I think it's easier if I put it horizontally, so it's easier to appreciate. So you can see that it has gone from basically having different stops in between. I can even add another stop here, you know, and change it to any color that I want to change it to, right? So, so you can see that the kind of freedom it gives you. So that's gradient fill. Then there is also filling image. I can actually use an image to fill this thing up, right? So image is also a kind of fill. So I can, for instance, go to so this is image fill. So when you click it, you can see it changes into a checkerboard. You can go, if you click on choose images, now go to your file, and then maybe find an image there that you want to fill it with, and boom, is now an image. You can actually, you know, crop it and decide which part of the image that you want to appear on your text, right? So that is image filling. Right, now there are layers. You can actually have layers of fill, right? So as I've taken this one, now this is the fill. You can actually have different layers. So like, let's make this one red, for instance, right? Red, and now I can add an extra layer of it. An extra layer, I can see this one has added a 20% black on top, right? I can make this, okay, so black is 20%. I can make it, let's say, 50% to make it darker. I can even add another, you know, layer, you know, and maybe make it blue even, right? Whether or not it's going to be visible is another story, but you can see it changes the color. And then I can hide each layer if I want to hide it. You can see using this eye icon, I can hide whichever layer I want to hide, or I can even remove it, you know, totally from here. Another thing you can do with the layer, of course, one layer can be a gradient. For instance, actually this particular layer, okay, it's not a gradient, but I can make one layer a gradient. I can make one layer an image even. So I can choose, for instance, that this layer, you know, becomes an image. Choose this image for this layer. It is not going to be too visible because it's 20%. And increase it to 50%, for instance. You can see it has started to become visible. The idea is that, you know, you can always, 80%, you can always choose, you know, and even add a layer on top of this one. And, you know, it gives you a lot of flexibility. You know, there is so much here you can do. Right. Then there are blend modes. We are not going to go very deep into blend mode because it's something that you can really explore on your own. But I just want to introduce you to it so you know it's there. Oh, by the way, you can actually fill in videos. Just I don't have any video to give you an instance of, but you can actually fill videos. Right. So sorry, let me undo that. Undo is Control Z. Right. So I can come here and blending is, so there are different ways I can do it. I can go from here, you know, to add a blend mode to it, or I can even add a blend mode, I think right from here. So this is also a blend mode, but applying it to the layer, but I can apply it to the color as well. So let's say, okay, it's harder to notice. Let me add a color, an object behind this thing so that it's easier. So let me color this object. I'm coming. Let's wait for me, please. Yes. So if I make this blue and I put this on top of it by putting that, we'll still discuss layers, right? But I'm bring to front. So this circle now is behind this yams, right? Now I can let me make these yams red. Now see what blend mode can do, right? I can go on blend mode and make this darken. You see how it's now interacting with the color behind it. Make it multiply, make it, so there are different blend modes that you can use. And it's basically essentially how they interact with pixels behind it. So these are different blend modes there are. And depending on whatever it is you want to design, you can, you know, choose to interact with it or not. Right. Somebody took away something from here. These people. Oh God. Oh God. Somebody. Please, you guys should not be changing things on my canvas. I beg. This canvas is not for you. This canvas here is for me. Don't change anything on the canvas. Right. I can add stroke to text, right? So this is a text. I select it. I can add stroke by putting this plus. Of course, you can change the thickness of the stroke by maybe making it 4 or making it whatever. You know, you can also kind of do this to, you know, drag it, you know, to choose whatever is it. And then you can choose whether you want this stroke to be inside, in the center, or outside, right? And then you can also choose the color of the stroke. Of course, you know, just like with anything, even the stroke can also be an image. The color of the stroke can also be an image, right? So, right, so that's stroke. Then next is effects. Effects essentially kind of is adding things like shadows. So here, as you can see, immediately I press plus, it's went to drop shadow. Now, here is how I can edit this shadow, right? I can add an, let me use a larger number to show you what shadow basically does. So I put a 10 on it. You can see that's a shadow. Why is casting a shadow down, you know, 10 pixels down. I can make that 20 pixels down, right? You can see 20 pixels down. And you can notice that the more you add shadow, the more it looks like this object is hanging, right? I can also add on an x-axis. You can see now the shadow becomes no longer just y, but also on the x-axis. Now, if I choose to blur it, I can add, let me remove a blur so you see what it looks like without a blur. You see that the shadow is now looking very sharp. You know, if I add a blur to it, you know, normally shadows will typically have a blur. You see what blurring does. I can make the blurring 10, you know, whatever I want the blurring to be, right? Yeah, spreads will only work with a pixelated this thing. But there are also other effects you can add. So this shadow we dropped is like a shadow that is dropped, but you still have an inner shadow. I can make it an inner shadow. Now this shadow is casted inside. Now, if you want to know what an inner shadow looks like, let's actually make it a little more realistic, right? So you can see he's now kind of looking as if this thing is a bit engraved, but I think in a way to make it more realistic, let me make it a -4 and a -4 here. And let me reduce the blur to 4. Right, it's now looking like the shadow is being casted. It's now looking like this thing is basically engraved in it. Now, there are tricks I can do here. For instance, let me show you some tricks. I'm changing the color of this thing. I'm using the eyedrop tool to select the color I want. So I want the color to be, the same color as the background. So I'm clicking on the background. So you can see that now the thing is now looking like it's the same material, but it's engraved inside the material. There are things I can do to make it look more realistic. For instance, now it's looking as if the light is coming from here, from this angle, and shining on this thing, so that this edge is casting the shadow. Right. I can, for instance, add a counter shadow. I can add another effect, add another inner shadow, but I'll make it a counter shadow because that one was a -4. So that I'll make this one maybe 4 and 4. And sorry, 4 and 4. And then I'm going to make, because it's impossible to cast 2 dark shadows at the same time. Then I'm going to make the shadow, why is this? Okay. I'm going to make the shadow a lighter shadow, right? By choosing the color. I can literally choose the color of the shadow I want to cast, right? So I've made it a lighter shadow. So it's now looking like light is coming from here, casting the shadow from this side, but brightening up this side. And then I can reduce the blur, maybe, let's say 2. Reduce the blur to 2. So it's now looking a lot more like something that is engraved, giving the illusion that is something is engraved inside this thing. So flattening something means converting it to, you can convert a text to a vector by flattening it. The way to flatten it is by you right-click it, you right-click the object and then you go to flatten. So when you flatten it, it becomes a vector. So it's no longer a text, it's now a vector. You can now, interact with it like you interact with, vectors. But we can talk about how to interact with vector objects pretty soon. Of course, you can still do everything like changing colors and all of that with this. Now, expanding text. If you notice, if I want to expand this text, if I do it like this, the text is not really expanded. But there are ways to expand, text. If I select this scale button, I can do it like this and it automatically expands. Of course, the shortcut to that is K and the shortcut to this is V. So if I press V, I'll go back to my initial cursor. So that is it for today. That's the end of the class today. So today we talked about essentially editing text in Figma. We basically talked about all of this. I'm going to still give you assignments for you to do. I'm going to give you assignments for you to do on the canvas so that you can practice what we've just talked about. And this lecture is going to remain here to guide you should you ever need it. So let me first lock this thing because you people will just give me a second. Let me lock all of this. So lock this. So when I lock it, it means that you guys can look at it, but you cannot change things inside there. All right. Okay, so that is the class for today anyway. I'm going to send you, so you're going to have two sets of assignments, right? So one assignment is going to be the team assignment from the earlier lecture, and the individual assignment is going to be the assignment on Canvas. And you're going to be doing your own assignments within your team, and the assignment I'm going to give, I want to see it done on your team's on your team section of the Canvas. So you do it on your own team section, because that is where I'm going to be finding you. If you do it on your own team section, I'll basically give you instructions of what to do, so that I'll know that this is your own work. The assignments on Figma are mostly going to be individual, but I'm also going to be able to, you're going to be working in teams, but you're going to be working individually. So everybody is going to have, their own objects that they are working on the canvas. Right, so that is it. I'm going to send you details of the assignments that you need to do. And please do them. As I said, this week is going to be very busy. So whatever assignments you have, I would suggest that you do it as early as possible, because you are going to have both materials to read and graphics to work on Figma, and also your users to work on, your actual project, your team project to work on. So this week, please be a lot more serious and a lot more dedicated. Right, that's it. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any questions? Yes, of course. Today's class is recorded. All our classes are recorded. So if you have anything to watch, you can always come and watch it. Yeah. Right. Yes, you are permitted to talk now. Ismail, you can talk now. Ismail, you had a question. You can ask. You need to unmute yourself. All right. So, any other question? Right. Ismail, are you talking? Ismail, I cannot hear you. Go. Ismail, they raise hand, but he's not talking. Right. Ali, you can talk now. Ali, you can talk now.
Hello.
Yes,
Okay,
go
can you
ahead.
hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. I can hear you, Ali. I can hear you. Ali, you can ask your question. Am I the only one who cannot hear him? Okay, it's my internet that is unstable, actually. I'll try to connect back to this. Any other questions? Ali, I've allowed you to talk, but it's like your network is not. You can type, Ali. You can type your question. You can type your question, so I can. I can answer it. Ali, you can type your question. Okay, so any other questions will come to the group. You can ask all the questions you can ask on the group. Meanwhile, you are going to be getting the assignments. I'm going like the assignments that I asked for. I'm going to the group so that you can ask all the questions that you need to ask. And there is also going to be your graded test. So there is also going to be your graded test. In fact, it's up right now as we speak. So you can go up and do your graded test. Please do it as soon as possible, the graded test. So there is going to be the graded test. There is going to be the team assignment, which is choosing your problem. And then there is going to be the graphic assignment, which is going to be on Figma. Of course, you can come up at any time on Figma to do your practice. You don't need anybody else to be on the canvas if you want to practice. Right. Okay. So that is it for today's class. I hope you guys have learned a lot. Thank you very much.